ever come across a children's show called Jolly Rodger? Do not let your kids watch it. My 8-year-old son Ethan is one of those kids that is very hard to keep entertained and to keep occupied. Usually after school, he will beg me to watch some TV, and so I let him watch it for an hour. But after around 10 minutes in front of the television, he's already bored. He then will move on to coloring and some other form of arts and crafts, and that will sometimes keep him occupied for an hour or two. This was the standard after-school routine that was in place with Ethan. Well, that was until we discovered Jolly Rodger. We first discovered the television show Jolly Rodger when I was scrolling through a popular kids streaming service. We had already scrolled through many different kids shows, all of which Ethan wasn't interested in. But when the small image and the big red writing that read Jolly Rodger showed up on the screen, Ethan immediately said he needed to watch that show. In my opinion, it looked like it might have been aimed at kids a bit younger than Ethan. But when I suggested that he choose another show, he furiously stomped his foot and insisted again that he must watch that show. I did have some work that I needed to do that day, but I decided that I would watch the first episode with him just to make sure that it was okay for him to watch. I was fairly certain that it would be, as it was under the kids category on the streaming service, but I guess I am just a bit of an overprotective parent. So we both sat next to each other on the couch and began to watch the first episode of Jolly Rodger. A loud and happy song filled with trumpets and drums started playing as a man walked out onto the screen. He came from inside a large pirate ship, which I guess is where the show got its name, and he walked up close to the camera as the words Jolly Rodger flashed up on the screen. This man wore a long-sleeved purple shirt and black denim jeans, and he had short and medium-length curly black hair that looked like little pieces of spiral pasta that emerged from his head. The thing that I noticed most about this man, though, was not his funny-looking hair. It was his smile. It was possibly the biggest grin that I've ever seen on anybody before. His lips were open wide, revealing perfectly straight white teeth underneath. Although it looked so innocent, I could tell something about this was deeply wrong. The corner of his lips was almost up level with his nose, and it almost looked like his lips were being pulled back in order to smile as wide as he was. This man then began to talk. "Hello, kids. How are we all today? I hope we're all happy, happy, happy," he said in an overly excited and over-the-top voice. "My name is Jolly Rodger, and I hope that we can all have a good time day. We will be singing, we will be dancing, and of course, we will be having fun." At this point, it seemed like the show was definitely going to be appropriate for Ethan. He was probably getting too old for this type of show. I did continue to watch the episode, and it continued pretty much how you would expect. Jolly Rodger pulled out a guitar and sang some nursery rhymes. Then he began teaching some dance, and then he moved into the arts and crafts portion of the show. In this episode, he was teaching the kids how to make a small pencil holder that the kids could take to school. Once the pencil holder had been built using an old toilet roll and some stickers, Rodger then said that it was time for him to go. "My time with you is now at an end," he told the viewer, his large smile still present. "But before I do, we can't forget to sing the Jolly Rodger song." Jolly Rodger then began to sing a short song. "Every day is happy, so don't be a grin dodger, so smile big and smile wide just like Jolly Rodger," he sang while waving to the camera. Jolly Rodger was right though. He did smile big, and he did smile wide. That was one thing that didn't change. Throughout the whole episode, he never once stopped smiling. That big wide smile never disappeared from his face. Once the episode was finished, I decided that it would be safe for me to leave Ethan alone to continue watching Jolly Rodger. I had some work to do, and Ethan seemed more than happy sitting there watching the show, which I guess was strange. He normally would just sit there and watch more than one episode of show before he grew tired of it and found something else to do. But there he was. He was sitting perfectly still on the couch as glued to the television. This was a good thing, I thought. It meant he was entertained and would allow me to get a few moments of peace to get on with work. I got up from the lounge and told Ethan I was heading to the kitchen, but he didn't respond to me. He was just focused on one thing, the television. I didn't think too much of it and left the lounge room and headed out to the kitchen and began to do some work. I guess I lost track of time because before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. I hadn't heard a peep out of Ethan, which was unusual, so I guess I got distracted by my work and had forgotten to check on him. I got up from the seat in the kitchen and went back out to the room and found Ethan. He was still sitting in the same spot where I left him, his eyes still transfixed on the TV. I went and grabbed the remote and paused the show and told him that it was time for dinner and that he would have to watch more of it tomorrow. He didn't protest or get mad. Instead, he just said okay, got up from the lounge and headed to the kitchen. As he was leaving the room, I glanced at the TV and saw that he was already on to episode 6, which is much more than he will usually watch in one sitting. We ate dinner together like normal, and then I spent the rest of the night helping Ethan with his homework. It was a pretty normal night. Everything seemed to be fine until it was Ethan's bedtime. I sent him to brush his teeth even though he claimed he didn't need to and that his teeth were fine. And while he was brushing in the bathroom, I went into his room to get his bed ready for him. I needed to tuck his quilt under his bed, and so I bent down to tuck it in. As I bent down, I noticed something sticking out from underneath his bed. It was only jutting out just an inch, so I couldn't quite make out what it was. I reached out and grabbed it and pulled it out from under the bed. It was only small and it was quite light, and it took me a second to realize what exactly it was. It was a small toilet roll, but over the top of it was a thin layer of tissue paper which was blocking one end. I felt something rattle inside, and so I looked down into it. Inside there was one single tooth. It was only a small tooth, and so I knew that it probably belonged to Ethan. At this point, I heard some footsteps behind me, and so I turned around and saw Ethan standing at the doorway, one hand behind his back. "You didn't tell me that you lost another baby tooth. When did you lose that?" I asked him. "Only today," he replied. "I pulled it out myself." "What do you mean you pulled it out yourself?" I asked him, growing concerned as to why he would pull his tooth out and place it into a toilet roll. Ethan looked at me for a second before replying because Jolly Rodger told me to. He told me that the magic wouldn't work if I didn't do it. It was a part of his arts and crafts. He told me that I needed one of my teeth and that I also needed some of your blood. Some of my blood? Before I could finish my sentence, Ethan suddenly stepped towards me and pulled his hand out from behind his back. In his hand, he was holding one of my razor blades. I don't even know how he managed to get it. I always keep them out of reach, but I guess it didn't matter now because he was holding one and he was walking towards me. I dropped the toilet roll holder and reached out my arm to grab the blade off of my son. He then swung his arm towards my hand and I felt the pain sear through my index finger. The razor blade had left a long, narrow cut along the top of my fingertip. Blood began to emerge from the wound. Ethan then quickly bent down, picked up the toilet roll holder that I had dropped and placed it on top of my finger. I quickly pulled the toilet roll off of my finger in disbelief as to what had just happened. Ethan then reached out his hand that was holding the razor blade like he was giving it back to me. I snatched it off of him and began to berate him. Maybe I was way too harsh on him, but I gave him a strong and probably quite loud talking too. He seemed upset, like he was remorseful for what he had done. I then put him into his bed and left the room, grabbing the toilet roll holder that now contained Ethan's tooth and was smeared in my blood. I went out of Ethan's room, slamming the door behind me. Something he said was beginning to worry me, though Jolly Rodger told me to. I didn't know what this meant, but knew that there was a way of finding out. I spent the next couple of hours watching through the episodes of Jolly Rodger. Everything I watched, though, seemed normal. It was a lot of singing and dancing, and through the arts and crafts section, he only ever made innocent little crafts, as you would normally see on kids' shows. There was no mention of teeth or drops of your parents' blood. I didn't know where he got all of that from because it wasn't in any of the episodes I had just watched. I was just finishing watching episode 6, and I could hear Jolly Rodger singing like he always did. Smile big and smile wide. Just like Jolly Rodger, he sang, his big smile flashing towards the camera just as he sang the words, "Comment, just like Jolly Rodger." That's when I felt it. I distinctly remember the feeling of 2 fingers, one on each side of my mouth, forcing their way inside of my mouth and then pulling upwards. I felt these fingers inside of my mouth pulling my lips, forming a large, unwanted grin. I didn't know what it was, and when I felt around my mouth, I couldn't feel anything, but I knew that there was something there forcing me to smile. That was 3 days ago now, and I can still feel the never-ending smile on my face. I can feel the fingers forcing my face into a large, painful smile. I now think back to the old saying, smiles are contagious. But this is one smile that I do not wish to pass on to anybody. So now I am cautious of anyone I see smiling. Maybe they are just happy, or maybe their kid also watched an episode of Jolly Rodger.